Africans who later played a critical role in the struggle for decolonization. Of course, Ethiopia does stand out to the extent that it was never successfully colonized. There was limited occupation, and you are familiar with that history. Therefore, it is not mine to educate you on your own history, but you are familiar with it. But it must concern us, particularly at this time. And I hope during this conversation I'll be able to demonstrate why, in order for us to understand the present, we must understand the past, which will also enable us to have a glimpse on what the future holds. And one of the speeches which is seldom referred to is a speech that was delivered in the year 1906, in the month of April, by a South African called Pixley Kaisaka Seme. And it is instructive that Pixley Kaisaka Seme was the first president of the African National Congress when it was founded in 1912. When Pixley Kaisaka Seme delivered that speech as a student at the University of Columbia, his title was The Regeneration of Africa. And what he was talking about at that time was an Africa that had borne the brunt of slavery and was laboring under the pain of colonization. Pixley Kaisaka Seme reminded his audience on that day that when the European powers assembled in Berlin in 1884 through to 1885, they agreed to divide Africa into spheres of influence for purposes of exploitation, so that the Germans had their share. If you remember, the Germans were present in what we now call Namibia. They were present in what we now call Benin, but was then known as Dahomey. They were present in what is now a part of Ghana, which was then the Togoland, the Volta area. The Belgians were present in Rwanda and Urundi, and they were also present in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Italians, to the extent that they could, tried to occupy Ethiopia and Eritrea, and were present in a portion of Somalia. The British were present, of course, in Uganda, in Kenya, in Nyasaland, in Rhodesia, and in Nigeria, and in many other places. The French, of course, were also present. And all these powers, even the Spaniards, were present in Equatorial Guinea, as were the Portuguese. And the whole idea was to use the resources, both natural and human, of the African continent, so that the partition of Africa was one that was designed to benefit the European powers. The partition was arbitrary. If you look at the nation states that we now have, or is it states that we now have with many nations in them, every other African country that we are talking about now is struggling to be a state. All of them, without exception, all of them. And this is what is what Pixley Kaisa Kasemo was saying. How will we regenerate this continent? And it's instructive that he was talking at a time when the entire continent of Africa was under colonization, excluding Liberia and Ethiopia, all of them. And therefore, when in 1945, Africans were represented in Manchester, Kwame Nkrumah was present at that meeting, Marcus Garvey was present at that meeting, Jomo Kenyatta was present at that meeting, Obafemi Awolowo was present at that meeting. The drive was to decolonize Africa. And one of the things that amazes me is that at that time, these individuals did not have the internet, they did not have WhatsApp, they did not have the kind of communication that we have now. But it is amazing at how they were communicating. Even air transport was not as it is now. I was just recently reading the activities of one of the greatest Africans who, in my view, ever lived, and whom many people do not know about. The great Ghanaian James Emmons Kwegyir Aggrey, normally referred to as Aggrey of Africa.